Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Jared Kushner testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee today and then spoke with many reporters right after. Watch.
Let me be very clear. I did not collude with Russia, nor do I know of anyone else in the campaign who did so. I had no improper contacts. Donald Trump had a better message and ran a smarter campaign, and that is why he won.
Ever heard Jared Kushner's voice before? Most people hadn't. You'll hear a lot more from him in a minute. But first, there's other news today. Democrats say they finally get it. They know why they lost the last election, and it was not actually because of Russian saboteurs. As Senator Chuck Schumer put it today in the New York Times op-ed, they lost because they failed to articulate an economic message that the middle class cared about. Now, to underscore that point, Schumer and House Leader Nancy Pelosi held their noses and ventured out into rural Clark County, Virginia today, a place they'd probably never been, but a place that voted for Trump by almost 20 points in November. While there, they unveiled a plan they are calling a better deal. It's basically the kind of soft economic populism that, in fact, Trump ran on in the fall, and pretty successfully. Things like lowering prescription drug prices, more attention to blue-collar jobs, an infrastructure plan for rural America. Interestingly, so far at least, there is not a single word about, global warming, transgender bathrooms, bombing Moscow. It doesn't look very crazy, actually, and it might work if Democrats really meant it. But do they? Well, actually, we can check that. We have the tape. Here's what leading Democrats have been talking about in public over just the past 24 hours.
The president is clearly worried that Bob Mueller is going to be looking into allegations, for example, that the Russians may have laundered money through the Trump organization.
There's a cloud of illegitimacy that's hanging over the White House as a result of the possibility that there was improper or illegal collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia.
This drip, drip, drip of information, these revelations are doing exactly what I've already predicted, and that is it's going to lead right to impeachment.
Right to impeach. We're going to have a lot more on Maxine Waters later in the show, but wait a second. Where's the part about raising middle-class wages or rebuilding rural America? If that is such a priority for Democrats, why haven't they mentioned any of it in, the last year? Today's supposed to be the launch of this new economic message, but flip on any of the other news channels, most of which are reliable barometers of what's important to Democrats. Do you hear anybody talking about the heroin crisis in New Hampshire or the lack of good-paying work in downstate Illinois? No, you don't. That's because they're talking instead about what they're always talking about. Trump's immoral, Vladimir Putin stole the election. That's the message, and for the foreseeable future, it will remain the message. Congressman David Cicilline helped launch the Better Deal message. He represents the proud state of Rhode Island and joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So I think this is the obvious message that Democrats should have run on in November. The middle class is dying. Someone needs to represent them. Democrats took a pass, ran on identity politics and frivolous, stupid issues. And Trump filled the void. But you can't convince me that your voters care about this stuff, because if they did, they would have demanded you talk about it last election.
This agenda, which we announced today, which is an agenda both from the House and the Senate, came about as a result of doing a lot of listening to our members who are home every weekend, listening to their constituents, and really understand that it's important that voters and the American people hear what Democrats are committed to do to raise people's wages, to create good-paying jobs so that people have a bright future. And so this Better Deal is really about how do we increase people's incomes, how do we reduce the cost of people's expenses in health care, in child care, in the things that people spend money on. And this is a very bold agenda that will do that. And I think you're going to hear Democrats continue to talk about it. It's our #1 priority to do all that we can to improve the lives of working people. We're obviously in the minority, so whether we can move this stuff or not, but I think it's important for the American people to say, if you elect Democrats, if you give us the responsibility of leadership, we will focus on raising incomes, rebuilding the middle class, reducing the costs in people's lives.
I get it. By the way,
and you said it was not crazy, so that's almost an endorsement.
Not only is it not crazy, that's the message.
That's right. But it's not just a message. No. I want to be careful. Okay. This is about our
Those
agenda.
Are the plans. Right. Look, I'm not belittling it at all.
No.
I agree with it.
Right.
Trump just ran on it and won.
Well, the
that's
difference is we're actually going to do it.
Okay, but
the president isn't doing it.
That's the point. I guess if I was rooting for Democrats, I would hope that you would. I don't think you will for a couple of reasons, but the obvious question is, why didn't you run on that in the last election, and why haven't you been talking about it even today? I haven't heard a single Democrat other than you and Schumer and Pelosi talk about it.
You heard there were a lot of Democrats. Jim Himes talked about it this morning. Barbara Lee talked about it.
Why haven't they been talking about it?
I think Democrats are talking about it. The point of putting together this Democratic agenda was so that we can more effectively make our case to the American people of what we stand for, what we're fighting for. You're going to hear a lot more about this as we roll out different parts of this agenda. But I think Democrats have been talking about what we can do to raise folks' income, to rebuild the middle class of our country, to deal with the escalating costs of prescription drugs.
Well, then let me ask you an obvious question.
And by the way, we obviously didn't do it effectively because we lost the election.
I don't think y'all did it at all. And I always wondered why, because it's such an obvious message. But hold on. How can you argue that economic case and argue for basically unrestrained low-wage immigration, which is your position?
No, we don't. First of all, that is not my position, number one. Number two, what we're talking about here is raising people's incomes, reducing the cost of people's expenses, creating good pathways for careers and job training.
Question. And it's really simple. High levels of low-wage immigration depress wages.
Democrats have always supported
a guess. We know that.
Comprehensive immigration reform that will fix our broken immigration system.
Why would you want millions of people here competing with low-wage American workers?
Millions of people are here, and the question is, what do we do about that?
Is that good for American wages?
Immigrants add tremendously to the economy of our country. Of course it is.
Do the 10 million illegal immigrants here help raise American wages?
The 10 million people who are here need a pathway to citizenship. We need
so now I know which is more important. No. That was just a simple question. Are the rights of illegals in America more important, or is
we want an economy that works for every hardworking American, that raises people's income, that will reduce the costs in their lives, and that will give them the skills and apprenticeships and career paths. And by the way, we also want comprehensive immigration reform. There's a bipartisan bill supported by Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, Republicans who don't care about middle-class wages.
No, that's not true. These are Republicans and Democrats who want to fix our broken immigration system.
Can we just get back to reality really quickly and away from the talking points? Will you concede that decades of social science have shown conclusively that if you flood a labor market with low-wage workers, wages go down?
No, I don't. Absolutely
you don't
not
believe in
accept
supply
that.
And demand.
I do not accept the fact that immigrants who have come to this country for the same reason my great-grandfather came, to build a better life for their families, are a drain on society. In fact, they contribute enormously
so now we're
to the economy of our country.
Now we're into faith-based economics.
No,
and so good luck with your plan, because you're not being real.
Immigration reform has to happen. It should be done in a bipartisan way. It should be comprehensive. There's a piece of legislation that will do it. That's how we should approach it.
But you're not taking wages seriously. I just want to know if you are.
We are taking wages seriously.
Obviously you're not. Congressman, here's a question for you. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says that it's time for Hillary Clinton to stop blaming her loss on sinister Russian forces. In an interview with the Washington Post, here's what Schumer said, quote, when you lose to somebody who's got 40% popularity, you don't blame other things, Comey, Russia, you blame yourself. What did we do wrong? People didn't know what we stood for, just that we were against Trump, and they still believe that.
I think it is absolutely essential that Democrats make it very clear what we stand for, what we are willing to fight for, and what we will achieve, what we'll accomplish on behalf of working families if we are given the responsibilities of leadership. I think that's what this agenda does.
Which working families from this country or people here illegally?
Working families in America, where we will raise people's wages, invest in... Well, people who live in America.
So really quick.
Everybody's
Is it more important to look after American citizens or people here who are not citizens?
We should absolutely have policies which support American citizens. We should have comprehensive immigration reform.
But if it comes down to which is more important?
You don't have to pick. We're an integrated economy. You can't say, we'll sell you this good, but we won't sell it to you based on...
No, because we let in 1.2 million new people every year.
And we should fix our broken immigration system by having comprehensive immigration reform,
you got to think this talking point through a little
and Democrats support, but we can't get a vote on it.
I think you need to think this are just a tiny bit more.
So do you. You need to think of the value and the contribution that immigrants make.
Congressman, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
For more reaction to the Democrats' better deal, we're joined by someone who's thought a lot about it, author and columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charles, do they mean it?
I think they do. I mean, Democrats for 100 years have been portrayed themselves, saw themselves, starting with FDR, as the party of the working class. I think the problem for Democrats is they've been living off their glory years for the last 20 or 30. You know, in the mid-20th century, they did great things for the country. They invented Social Security.
Right.
They decided the elderly should not be destitute. They're the ones who gave us Medicare, Medicaid. But the problem is, as Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote in the late 1970s, the Democrats, who were the party of ideas, for 3 generations, ran out of ideas, and it's the Republicans, conservatives, who came up with the ideas in the Reagan days. And it seems to me the Democrats are still living off that legacy. I mean, I have no objections to anything in the program that you have heard outlined. I'm rather amused that it's a better deal, meaning, you know, we had the New Deal, we had the Fair Deal, so deal seems to work for us, so let's try it again. But this is stuff at the margins, the minimum wage, for example. These are old policies that are now being put together in some kind of ideological framework, but it doesn't really work. We just had the study from Seattle about the effect of raising the minimum wage.
No, it does. It's a math question. It doesn't work. But the orientation toward the middle class seems a good idea. Is that possible, though, if your party is based on identity politics? Identity politics is about hating the middle class.
It seems to me they went to identity politics because they ran out of larger national ideas. For 3 generations, they worked on the idea of a safety net, of a social network around people supported by the government. They brought us into the modern world because before FDR, we really had a government that could have been, I mean, it wasn't that different from the government of the founders. The problem is, where do they go? They have their heart perhaps in the working class, but what are their ideas? It seems to me the only people with real ideas is the left, the Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
That's an argument that's got comprehensiveness to it. We want to go the way of Western Europe. That may not be the greatest society on earth, but that's their ideal. You start with national health care. That's not in the program that was outlined now. But national health care, the government runs everything. And that's sort of the staple. That's sort of the tent pole for that. The idea is the government will take care of you. High taxation, high regulation, and that's what the Western Europe is the model of. It's not a terrible place to live. It's not a hellhole, but it's not America. America's rather different. We have a much higher attachment to the idea of liberty than we do to equality. There's no Statue of Equality in New York Harbor. Statue of Liberty. We're different that way.
I think de Blasio is working on one.
Yeah, but that's why he's failing. It's not going to work in this country. So, in other words, all I'm saying is, historically speaking, this is a modest attempt to get back to the ideal or the objectives of liberalism, but it's such a paltry step that unless you go to the far left, I don't see how it works.
Well, a party comprised of the rich and the poor cannot become the middle class party. I mean, I wish them luck.
And that's why, as you say, they turned to identity politics.
Of course.
It was a substitute for thinking in national terms.
Exactly. Charles Kramer, thank you.
My pleasure.
Jared Kushner spoke behind closed doors to a Senate committee today and had some words for the press. We'll show you what he said coming up. Plus, Maxine Waters says her critics, including this show, are a bunch of racists. That's a response to the question we asked, which is, how'd she buy a $4.3 million house on a public servant's salary? We'll unpack that a little bit coming up.